Thugs try to rob a shopkeeper.
Nobody move! Give me what's in that register!
Their plan was perfect except for the fact that the old man standing in the shop was no ordinary fighter. He was a legend, and he proved it on that particular day. Welcome back to Jason Recaps. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me.
Yeah, it does.
It was just another regular day on the city bus when things suddenly took a wild turn. Two rough-looking guys hopped on and didn't waste a second before walking right up to an elderly black man, throwing nasty insults his way and telling him to move from his seat.
Hey, old man, you mind moving? We gotta sit together.
They clearly thought they could intimidate him, but the old man wasn't having it. Out of nowhere, he slapped one of them hard across the face, stunning both of them. Before they could react, a bearded man stepped in. He wasn't loud or flashy, but his presence made them hesitate. He called them out firmly for their disrespect and told them to back off.
There's 2 seats in back.
Then, calm as ever, he sat down in the seat ahead like nothing had happened. Now, these punks didn't take that well. They mistook the elderly guy for weak and thought they'd scare him even more. Big mistake. Instead of backing down, the old man stood up again. And this time, he wasn't just using words. In a matter of seconds, he knocked them both out with a few well-aimed punches that left everyone on the bus stunned. That man's name was Frank. He wasn't just some random commuter. He was a Vietnam veteran who had lived through hell and come back with scars that never really healed. His life had been stuck in a quiet rut for years, but everything was about to shift in a way he never imagined. Frank's story started way back in a simple household in rural California. He grew up helping his folks run a small farm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Despite the hardships, Frank found joy in the little things. One of those joys was Lindsay, the girl he'd been sweet on for as long as he could remember. They had dreams, plans, and promises. But the war came knocking and flipped everything upside down. Before shipping out, Frank promised Lindsay he'd be back soon.
I already enlisted.
But soon turned into nearly a decade. For 7 long years, he endured the worst the war had to offer: gunfire, capture, torture. At one point, he was even held as a prisoner of war. Through pain, starvation, and relentless questioning, Frank clung to life, refusing to let the war break his spirit. Eventually, he was freed, but he didn't return the same man who had left. Injured and worn down, Frank was sent home. The first thing he did was rush to Lindsay's house, expecting a warm reunion. But when he got there, his heart shattered. She had moved on, married someone else, and started a family. Frank stood outside her door in disbelief, carrying not just physical wounds, but emotional ones that cut deeper. Devastated, but not defeated, Frank tried to build a new path. He applied to the police academy, thinking maybe his military background would help. But his injuries led to rejection after rejection.
Really in the market for a college graduate.
Without a college degree and with limited job skills, he kept hearing the same thing everywhere. Sorry, we've already filled the position. Slowly, hope began slipping through his fingers. With no other choice, Frank started selling sausages on the street to make ends meet. 40 years passed like that. It was far from the life he'd imagined, but he made do.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your business. God bless.
And came the bus incident that would change everything. When those 2 thugs picked on the old man, Frank didn't even plan to get involved. He just couldn't watch that happen and do nothing. His instincts kicked in, and before he knew it, he had become an unexpected hero. Other passengers clapped and thanked him, but what really made the moment unforgettable was that someone had filmed it. That video blew up online. Overnight, Frank became a viral sensation. People dubbed him the cool guy.
It's awesome.
Man, this old guy's badass. People started caring about me.
And shared his video across all platforms. He was on shirts, murals, and memes. Even the police, instead of giving him a hard time, gave him a ride home with a respectful nod, like he was one of their own. Reporters showed up at his doorstep, all wanted to talk to him. Frank, who had been invisible to the world for decades, was suddenly famous.
Started fitting in again. People wanted to be with me.
What meant more than the headlines was the look of pride in his mother's eyes. Sadly, that joy didn't last long. Not long after, she passed away, leaving Frank alone in their house with only her dog for company.
Leave you, my house, my beloved dog Baxter.
What are you doing?
Luckily, Frank wasn't entirely alone. He still had Klondike, his closest friend from the war. The two of them had shared everything: pain, battles, survival. Now they shared quiet evenings, talking about old times and what might come next. One night, Klondike got emotional and told Frank something that stuck with him. "You gave me a home, man. You're the only family I've got left."
You're a damn good friend. You and Baxter are the only family I got.
Life began to look up a little. One day, Klondike handed Frank a USB drive and asked him to keep it safe. Frank didn't think much of it at the time.
This your mother's safe deposit box, will you?
Klondike stepped out to buy cigarettes and never returned. That same day, two men showed up at Frank's place, demanding the flash drive. Before Frank could even figure out what they were talking about, the situation turned violent. Turns out, those men had confronted Klondike too, but he wasn't the type to go down easy. Klondike took both of them on and held his own, but just as he was turning to leave, a shot rang out.
Hey, I got jokes. You doing some stand-up now? Man.
He was killed instantly. The cops called Frank to identify the body. It broke him. His best friend, the one who had survived war and hardship, was gone. Frank couldn't just sit still. He begged the police to do something to find whoever did this. They promised they were on it.
You're gonna get those scumbags, aren't you?
We're gonna do our best.
But their vague replies didn't sit right with him. A few days later, he bumped into a neighbor who had lost her brother to a similar attack. She was frustrated, too. Felt like the police weren't treating these cases seriously. That's when doubts started growing in Frank's heart.
Fuckers are as crooked as all hell.
Then came a headline that pushed him over the edge. A white kid in town had been murdered, and the suspect was caught almost immediately. That stark contrast left a bitter taste in Frank's mouth. Why was justice moving so fast in some cases and crawling in others? He marched to the station and demanded answers about Klondike's case again.
You inferring I'm a racist, Mr. Vega?
Yeah, I am.
Same empty replies. "We're working on it."
Let us do our job, okay?
Frank had heard enough. He decided to dig into it himself. Back at the spot where Klondike was shot, Frank found 3 clues: an empty bullet casing, a necklace, and a little pendant shaped like a girl. He took the bullet to a local gun shop, hoping to figure out what kind of weapon it came from. The guy at the shop took one look and said, "That's not from any regular gun. That's military-grade stuff." Then he noticed the necklace and recognized the girl's photo on it. "That's Terrence's wife," he said. "Lives just a few blocks from here." He gave Frank directions. When Frank got there, a tired woman holding a baby opened the door. She explained that her husband, Terrence, hadn't been home in weeks. She was raising 3 kids on her own, and they missed their dad terribly. A friend had recently seen him at a nearby basketball court and told her about it. She passed that tip along to Frank.
My girlfriends tell me they see him playing basketball.
Frank made his way to the court and asked around.
You ask your mama.
At first, nobody wanted to talk, but once he got a bit firmer, they cracked. One guy mentioned a name, Ronaldo. Apparently, Ronaldo had answers and lived nearby.
Run with some boys across town, that's it.
When Frank knocked on Ronaldo's door, he was greeted by someone dressed like a priest, totally unexpected. Before Frank could even say anything, a neighbor mistook him for a burglar and started making a scene. Once the confusion cleared, the neighbor told him Ronaldo hung out at a nearby bar every morning and gave him the address.
Look, he's my roommate. He's never here.
Before heading there, Frank ran into another situation, this time outside his house. A young couple was arguing, and it looked serious.
Goddamn tired of carrying.
The guy stormed off in anger, leaving the woman, Amber, and their son, Martin, outside. Frank saw bruises on her face and invited her inside. He helped clean her up, and the 3 of them shared a warm moment over dinner. For the first time in a while, Frank felt like he wasn't alone. The next day, he went to the bar. The second he walked in, the place went cold. The crowd recognized him and clearly weren't fans. Frank didn't flinch. He powered through the first floor and made it to the second, where he finally found Ronaldo. When Frank asked about Terrence, Ronaldo pulled out a knife, claiming he wouldn't talk. But Frank wasn't in the mood for games. With one swift move, he threw Ronaldo out the window. Scared out his mind now, Ronaldo quickly confessed. Terrence had been hanging around a woman who worked at a massage parlor nearby. As Frank turned to leave, he ran into his police friend again. This time, the officer had a worried look and warned him that his private investigation was making waves. Some folks around town weren't too happy. Even the top brass at the police department was about to slap cuffs on Frank. That's how serious things had gotten. If it weren't for a few sympathetic officers who stepped in at the last second, Frank would have been hauled away just like any other suspect. When the dust settled and they confronted him, Frank didn't mince his words. He stared them down and made it crystal clear. He wasn't about to sit quietly while the people meant to uphold the law ignored the murder of his closest friend. One of the officers, clearly losing patience, warned him, "You need to back off. This isn't your fight. Keep poking your nose where it doesn't belong, and don't expect us to save your skin next time." But Frank wasn't backing down. He looked them dead in the eyes and replied coolly, "I don't need your help." Frank went home thinking maybe he'd finally get a moment to breathe, but when he opened the door, his heart dropped. The place was wrecked. Before he could make sense of it, a massive guy came out of nowhere and grabbed him in a vice grip. "Where's the flash drive?" the man growled. But just when the man tightened his grip, Frank exploded into action, years of military training kicking in. With one solid move, he flipped the guy straight through the window. After that chaos, Frank went straight to find Martin, his neighbor's son, and a tech whiz. He hoped the kid could help him figure out what was so important about this mystery flash drive Klondike had left him. When they finally opened it up, what they found was strange: city maps, building permits, and a long list of names. But then Frank spotted something odd, a name listed as Black Panther. That nickname triggered a deep memory, and Frank felt a chill run down his spine. Trying to connect the dots, Frank headed to the massage parlor Ronaldo had mentioned earlier. It was one of those places where people went more for secrets than back rubs. He asked for a woman named Tatiana. As soon as she heard his name and why he was there, her expression changed. She got real nervous, real fast. When Frank asked her about Taryn, she dodged the question and walked away, pretending to be busy with work. Frank knew something was off. He waited until her shift ended and followed her home, hoping she'd slip up and reveal more. When she got home, Frank tried sneaking in through a window, but he didn't get far. A neighbor spotted him halfway through the window frame. At first, the guy looked like he was about to call the cops, but when he took a closer look and realized who Frank was, everything changed. The neighbor gave him a wink and casually mentioned that the back door was unlocked. Frank didn't need more than that. He slipped inside and crept upstairs. There he was, Taryn, in bed with Tatiana. The moment Taryn saw Frank, he reached for a gun and fired. But Frank ducked and took him down in a blink. In no time, he had Taryn in the kitchen, holding his hand to the garbage disposal. The guy was screaming, flailing in agony. It didn't take long for the truth to start spilling out. Taryn confessed that Klondike had been killed, not by him, but by a guy named Sebastian. But that wasn't the worst part. Turns out, Sebastian and Taryn were just middlemen. Someone else was calling the shots. Frank pushed harder, and finally, Taryn cracked. Through gritted teeth, he said one name, Black Panther. He even gave Frank a location. Later, when Frank got back to his neighborhood, he walked into another messy situation. The same couple from before, Amber and her angry husband, were in the middle of another loud fight. This time, the guy had really lost it. Frank didn't waste time. He stepped in and told the man to back off. The guy, full of rage and jealousy, accused Frank of sleeping with his wife. Before the guy could swing, Frank had him in a painful arm lock and then booted him right out the front door. Amber, clearly shaken but relieved, hugged Frank and thanked him. She could see how drained he looked and invited him over for dinner. Her son Martin was staying the night with a friend, so it was just the two of them. Frank, despite everything going on, got excited about the idea. He spent the afternoon cleaning up, picked out his best suit, and bought a small bouquet of fresh flowers for Amber, a simple but sweet gesture. When Amber opened the door later, her jaw nearly dropped. Frank looked sharp, like he was ready for a movie premiere. They had dinner outside under soft garden lights, with the scent of flowers drifting in the air. Frank had brought food, but Amber had cooked too, and she laughed when he admitted he liked her cooking better. As the night wore on, they opened up to each other. Amber shared how her husband used to be a good man, someone kind and gentle, but over time he had turned into someone she no longer recognized or loved. They were just about to kiss when the front door opened. Martin had come back unexpectedly. His sleepover got canceled. The moment was broken, but they didn't let it ruin the night. Instead, the three of them sat around laughing, eating leftovers, and just enjoying each other's company. When it was time to go, Frank suggested Amber and Martin stay over. Their front door was still busted from the fight earlier, and he didn't want them unprotected. The next morning, Frank met up with his old buddy on the police force and handed over the flash drive. He told him everything, how Klondike's murder, the permits, and the mysterious Black Panther were all connected. Before leaving, Frank asked him for a favor. If anything happens to me, take care of my dog. Later that day, Frank stopped by a church. He needed clarity. He asked the priest for a private confession. Frank didn't beat around the bush. He told the priest straight up that he was about to do something there'd be no coming back from. Something permanent. That night, Frank went to the location Taryn had mentioned, a rundown warehouse guarded by men who looked like they belonged in a crime movie. They wouldn't let him in, but when Panther heard Frank's voice from inside, he came out personally. Panther didn't hide anything. He looked Frank in the eye and told him that Klondike died because he tried to take something valuable. And now, Panther wanted the flash drive. When Frank claimed he didn't know anything about it, Panther's goons grabbed him and strapped him into an electric chair. But pain didn't scare Frank anymore. He'd seen worse. He stayed silent, even as they cranked up the voltage. Panther was furious. Before leaving, he threw one last threat at Frank. You like Amber? Then maybe she should pay the price for your stubbornness. Panther didn't know that Frank had slipped a matchbox into his pocket. With one quick spark, he ignited an explosive charge he'd planted earlier. The warehouse erupted into flames, throwing guards off balance. Frank broke free and charged straight at Panther. The two men clashed, fists flying. Panther spotted a gun on the floor, but before he could grab it, he ran for the exit and jumped onto a bus, hijacking it. Frank spotted another bus and took the wheel, chasing after him through the city streets. The chase was intense, buses speeding, swerving, horns blaring. Panther thought he could lose him, but Frank made a sharp turn and rammed his bus into Panther's, sending it crashing off the road. Panther's bus collided with a train, leaving wreckage everywhere. Somehow, both survived. Panther crawled out and took off on foot, limping but determined. Frank, bruised and limping too, chased him down. In a twist, Frank ran into the same bald guys from the bus incident. They hadn't forgotten how he embarrassed them and wanted revenge. They were even filming it, thinking they'd finally get the upper hand. Panther, meanwhile, had slipped into a nearby house and grabbed Amber. He held her at knife point until Frank burst through the door like a storm. He tackled Panther into the wall. The fight spilled into the street. Panther got the upper hand, pinning Frank down. Just as he was about to strike, Amber jumped on his back, screaming and scratching. That distraction gave Frank the edge. He rolled up and delivered a knockout punch that ended the fight once and for all. The crowd that had gathered cheered. Amber rushed to Frank, gently touching his bruised face. Now, she said with a warm smile, can I finally take care of your wounds? The next day, the headlines were blazing. The villain strikes back. But Frank's fight had turned into something bigger. He'd exposed a whole web of corruption tied to Mayor Williams and a dangerous national crime ring. Because of his courage, Frank was named an honorary police officer. And after all the chaos, Frank, Amber, and Martin finally got a fresh start. Peace, family, and a quiet life Frank had fought so hard to earn. Thanks a ton for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe for more content like this. And hey, tap the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Catch you in the next one.